Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Total Soccer Show. My name is Joe Lowry, and today we are diving into all things Major League Soccer with a very special episode, an MLS transfer window special. The window slammed shut quietly. Windows always have to slam shut, but it did sort of slam shut quietly. I don't make the rules. Last week in Major League Soccer, and so to help me break down the biggest moves, the most interesting moves, the teams that did the best work, the teams that did the worst or the most confusing work, and so much more, is the one, the only, the Guardian's Jeff Reuter. Jeff, how are you, man? You're in a different spot. Tell me more.
I am back in Atlanta. I went down to Tampa for exactly one day yesterday and came back. So, Jet Warrior, I guess. I don't know. It's like practice kind of for the World Cup, right? Like I'll be LA, Vancouver, Seattle, Vancouver, LA at one point of that tournament. So like, whatever. Put my body through whatever it needs. These are the pain caves that Emma Hayes preached about. I'm sure. Yes.
This is exactly what she had in mind and not anything different. I mean, it's good, Jeff, that you're getting your reps in, just to remember how to fly, like, if you're in the middle seat, what's the etiquette on the armrests, all that sort of stuff. If you're in the, there's lots of these things to consider, and I'm glad that you're starting to practice now because that's really the only thing to do ahead of the World Cup.
You just can't assume that like the World Cup starts and you flip the switch and suddenly you're made for the moment, right? I think sometimes you actually need to give evidence to your fans that things are going in the right direction and you're learning the right lessons. And I think that all of my fans have none of my fans have told me that I use the middle seat armrest incorrectly. And so for that, I feel World Cup ready.
It's a difficult one. It really is. The middle seat etiquette there, I think, is tricky. But you know what else is tricky? Parsing through a bunch of MLS transfer window news. The window closed on Thursday last week. We broke down a bunch of the stuff over at Backheel, and now we're going to break down a bunch of the stuff here. Jeff's been writing a bunch of stuff as well, and we're going to talk about some of that stuff on this very show, in this very segment. If you want to support more of the Total Soccer Show, go to patreon.com/Total Soccer Show. We're doing a live show in LA on the first day of the World Cup. We're very, very excited about it. If you're not a Patreon subscriber, tickets will open for you to be able to purchase on Monday. If you are a Patreon subscriber, you can get in the trenches right now and go make that happen. We are stoked about all of that. I'm also stoked to talk about this stuff. So, Jeff, let's do it. I've waited as long as I possibly can to talk about a bunch of the moves that happened on deadline day, effectively. The moves that were announced the day after deadline day. The first one that we're going to dive into before we get to some superlatives in the second and third segments. It's a move by the Colorado Rapids to acquire cult legend. I don't know if it's too early to call George Manungu that, but to acquire George Manungu from the Seattle Sounders. This was in exchange for $2 million in general allocation money. So it's a big haul for the Sounders here, bigger than the fee that they were going to get, it sounds like, from the European suitors that they had for George Manungu. Jeff, Manungu's maybe a player that some folks outside of Seattle don't know a whole lot about, I suppose. And this is a big fee for someone that has not become a regular starter in Major League Soccer, and yet the Rapids shelled it out anyway. What do you make of this move?
It feels like it's a pretty classic Colorado Rapids move to me, in the sense that it's looking at someone who maybe isn't getting utilized as often as most players expect to be, and therefore you assume that maybe there's more upside than what's being shown. With Manungu, he's always worked really well so far for Brian Schmetzer, coming off the bench and being a very dynamic kind of change of pace guy. He was arguably their best on-ball, just purely one-on-one take-on guy throughout the entirety of his tenure. And I would imagine then from the Seattle side, the assumption was that, just based on what Sounder at Heart and others in the market were reporting throughout the winter, that they were going to declutter the forward third a bit and probably either accept a trade offer for Denis Musovski or Paul Rothrock left in free agency if he had, right? And that would have freed up more minutes for Georgi Manungu. Well, Musovski is still there. Paul Rothrock signed a new contract and now has worked into more of a starting role, really. And so then when you look at Georgi Manungu, he just didn't really have that pathway to starts anymore. And so you can understand where a player then is saying, hey, I need to get going. He just kind of broke into the Burkina Faso national team over the last few months, went to AFCON. So like there's a desire to kind of grow in his stature. He's 23 years old, obviously. And I would imagine then being able to go to a place like Colorado, who do need to just upgrade talent generally after another sort of cycling through their roster over the last 2 windows or so. It's a good opportunity for him. It's a conference he's familiar in, so at least the opponents are going to be very familiar as he comes against them. I think that the real question, Joe, is just going to be, we always joke about sample sizes whenever we talk about numbers, right? And we always talk about like, okay, it doesn't matter yet, and then sometime way later than everyone else wants us to start saying it matters, we say it kind of matters, but not fully matters, right? And so we're really annoying about these sorts of things. And so when you see a player who does have relatively the small sample size of Georgi Manungu in terms of his run out at the club level, the question is just going to be how is he able to sustain that, and given how much Colorado invested in bringing him over in the trade, becoming a starting player in his own right.
Yep, I think you distilled that down really well, and I'm sure that's the question that was being bantered around the Rapids front office and coaching staff when they're thinking about, okay, who do we want to get? Because we still have a hole on the wings, and we need to become more dangerous in those areas. And Manungu, in some ways, is a perfect fit for the Rapids, and I'll get to that in just a second. But there are questions. I mean, there's a reason why Seattle were willing to let him go, right? I mean, $2 million is a good haul of allocation money, almost regardless, I suppose. But still, I mean, if Seattle had thought that he was ready to impact their team in a larger way, you can bet that he would have been on the field, right? So it's not like this is an absolute slam dunk, can't miss sort of acquisition. I don't think those really happen in Major League Soccer pretty much almost any price tag. I can only think of a few examples. But I do still like this deal for both parties. I think we've already kind of outlined why it made sense for Seattle. Jeff, you talked about how crowded that attack is. I mean, This offer, I mentioned this already, they had an offer from Sweden that was about $1.5 million dollars according to reports. This is more than that. This is worth more than that to the Sounders' salary cap. And so it's not a surprise to see them pull the trigger on a deal like this. For Colorado, I think the reason why they're willing to take the risk on a still somewhat unknown product, and if listeners don't know a lot about Manungu, his story is amazing. He's only got vision in one eye. He came through the Sounders Next Pro setup and all these things. He's got a great story. Go read it at Sounder at Heart and all that good stuff. But I think the reason why they're so interested and enamored with Manungu is because they play through their wingers all the time. If you watch the Rapids, and I'm sure a lot of listeners and viewers have, if you watch the Rapids, they will keep Rafa Navarro, who's had an amazing season so far. He looks fantastic for the Rapids. They'll keep Navarro quite deep. Matt Wells, new managers, allowing him to drop between the lines almost as this second number 10 at times in their shape. And they keep the wingers high and very, very wide to stretch the opposition. And so a lot of the play then goes to the wingers. I talked with Matt Wells for a piece that will come out at Backheel in the next couple weeks. He called his team, this was before this deal came through, he called his team a winger's dream, I think, to play in, because so much of the attacking play is funneled through the wingers. And it's easy to see in the tape. And so I don't think it's a surprise that Colorado went out and got Dante Seeley for $2 million, basically an allocation money over the offseason. He's been not great to start the year. There's time there, maybe not. And then Manungu. Both of those guys like to be high and wide. They like to go and attack on the dribble. And that's exactly what Manungu is going to bring to Colorado. So it's by no means a slam dunk deal, but I'm fascinated by this move. Jeff, one other move that we should talk about that happened that was a fairly high profile one, arguably even higher profile, on deadline day is Santi Moreno heading to FC Dallas. They've acquired Santi Moreno on loan from Fluminense in Brazil. 25-year-old Colombian. He's going to be on loan as a designated player through this season with a purchase option. Jeff, my question for you is sort of simple on this. Is this the piece that Dallas needed to make them a threat in the Western Conference? Spoiler alert, I think the answer is no.
Yeah, I think, we share that sentiment, right? Like, generally, the reason we were really excited about Lucho Acosta just over a year ago was the idea that was the sort of playmaker who was a more natural complement to Petar Musa than Jesus Ferreira was, right? And the idea was that getting a true number 10 would be able to create those chances and give him just like a partner to continue to operate off of. And not having that player, like Santi Moreno can play as a number 10 most often. I think of him as a winger, right? And I think that ideally when you get him in his best spots, he is going to drift wide of center, which is good for spacing. Again, like, you don't want someone who's necessarily going to be trying to make like second striker runs and pretty much just be playing right in Petar Musa's shadow and then force him to try to recalibrate his movement. But at the same point, what's also going to be interesting about Moreno now at this point is that when we last saw him in Major League Soccer, he was on a team that we were pretty openly talking about as pretty chaotically organized, not necessarily having dependable patterns of play or dependable kind of interplay. And so if he does get more of that, is there more you can see? Yeah, absolutely. I think that's why you see this trend generally of MLS clubs. I can think of the ones in Texas, actually all three of them, but several clubs lately have been looking towards players who have already left MLS and then bringing them back in, right? And maybe more important roles than they were used to in the past one, because they've at least seen that you can acclimate to the league. So I understand what they're going for here, and I think that the floor on this one is pretty high, just in the sense of like we know what we can expect from it. But yeah, to your point, Joe, is that going to be the move that pushes them from that sort of like wild card play-in pack that we projected them to be in, that they seem to be operating in, and push them into, the territory that maybe RSL and San Jose have gotten themselves into based on their winter dealings? I'm still pretty skeptical about that one.
Yeah, I am too. And all this stings because I want to talk about Dallas in a more positive light, because they've been better than I thought they would be this season. They put together some strong results already. And I think Moreno's a good player. I think he absolutely makes them better, and I can see the logic sort of behind getting a deal done for Santi Moreno. I mean, I guess you just call up your pals at Fluminense and say, well, we gave you Lucho at a nice little deal, now cut us a deal. There's been a lot of back and forth between those clubs and Andre Zanota and the front office in Dallas and all their Brazilian connections. But the problem is, I think this Dallas team is good. I actually think, and I didn't think this coming into the year, but I kind of think they could be or could have been great if they had been a bit more aggressive in this window. And I just don't think Moreno is a DP level attacker in Major League Soccer. I think he's a very good player. I think he's going to be impactful in MLS. And again, he clearly makes his team better. I think he fits fine along with Musa. I really liked him in Portland. And that Portland team, you said it, Jeff, didn't have a whole lot of structure to it. So if he's got a better structure around him, I could see him being platformed for even more success. But it's just such a shame that Petar Musa is as good as he is, and he's not getting everything that you have to go and help elevate this team. I think Dallas are going to be very competitive this year, and I didn't think that coming into the year, but I think they very much are, or at least until the summer, and maybe some crazy stuff happens then. So I suppose I want the right to take this back. But I think they actually could have competed in the Western Conference, and I just don't think that this move or any of the moves that they've made has been enough for that to happen. All that said, I am looking forward to seeing Santi Moreno back in Major League Soccer, so I am excited about that. Jeff, another couple of moves we want to get to, or potential moves in one case in this segment. First, let's start with one that's already been done, and that's Antoine Griezmann signing for Orlando City. We referenced this a little bit on last week's show and kind of ended up holding it for today because we'd have a little bit more space. One thing I'm curious about with this whole Griezmann situation is how he and Martin Ojeda and Marco Pasalic all fit together in this team. That's three attackers that kind of like to have the ball. Pasalic maybe is comfortable a little bit wider, and so maybe he can shift that way to accommodate some extra presence in the central areas. But that's a lot of central sort of talent in this Orlando team. I almost wonder if somebody's going to pick up the phone and make a call for one of these other non-Griezmann guys and see if they can get some sort of deal done. Jeff, on the Griezmann front, it does seem unlikely that he's going to solve all their problems. As excellent as I think he's going to be in Major League Soccer, and I'm curious maybe how excellent you think he's going to be. But what else does this Orlando team need, do you think, to make Griezmann's time in Orlando a success?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you're absolutely right. Like, you've got to find the ways to get the movement, because if you put them all in the final third, generally they're going to kind of drift into similar spaces. And I almost wonder if it's going to be, was it a Euros where Didier Deschamps had to kind of use Griezmann as a central midfielder for one tournament, and it worked way better than anyone.
Yeah, we saw him at the World Cup too, dropping
too.
Quite deep in 22. Yeah.
Right, so like there's a chance that maybe he wants to play free 8. He sees what Ricky Puig is doing and wants some of that, and that would be fun. That would be a blast. Like, not the deployment we would expect necessarily, but that's also the element of surprise this team maybe needs, because right now you can predict a lot about Orlando City, and it's that they're going to be woefully overmatched based on where the squad was as they kind of held out to make sure they could get Griezmann and bring him in. And so he doesn't fix defensive issues, right? He doesn't fix the fact that they have kind of generally a bottom third starting goalkeeper in Major League Soccer. It doesn't fix the fact that they have some serious questions about how they will progress upfield, how they utilize width when Pasalic, again, is moving into more central spaces and isn't actually playing as like that right winger. So there's a lot of questions there. And it's one of those cases where you look and say, this feels different than Thomas Muller coming to Vancouver a year ago. And it's impossible. This is one of those things that gets really difficult with stars of his magnitude, where it's like you only can really compare it to stars of his magnitude, right? And look and say, this doesn't seem like Didier Drogba kind of dropping into the Montreal Impact and suddenly, jolting them to life. It doesn't feel like there's the infrastructure or maybe the just kind of like thankless workers around him who will be like so grateful to play with a player of his caliber, right? Which is the other kind of classic profile that tends to do very well when these guys come to Major League Soccer. The other thing, though, with Orlando is that ultimately they just need to score again. And that's where Griezmann can definitely help. I think they only have 5 goals so far. They have like a negative 12 expected goals through 5 games, which you shouldn't be able to do statistically. They are the only team that's below a negative 7 in the league as I'm quickly scanning the table. So they need to pad some back themselves. And so in that sense, I think that being able to get someone who does have that sort of dynamism, that sort of unpredictability, and that sort of just second world-class intellect on the field to be able to dissect and work with Ojeda, I think that partnership could be excellent, like maybe Lucharu good. But it's just what is going to be built around them, and will he arrive in time, Joe, for Orlando to kind of salvage this season rather than say he's one for the sprint season and for 27-28 as we start to say things like 27-28.
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think that the summer window comes earlier in relative to all the games on the MLS calendar this year is a huge help for Orlando. And I said this earlier on in the season when some of this was first coming to the light, which is that I would toss my season in the trash in exchange for Antoine Griezmann. I mean, that's how good I think he's going to be. And it's not like Orlando were trying to do that, right? I mean, they swung on a lot of U22s. I think they missed on a lot of their roster build. And amidst all the turnover, I think they got worse this offseason. So that can be true, but I'd still take that to go sign Griezmann. I think he's going to be a very, very good player for this team. They need to make a move at center back. Goalkeeper's a huge question, though I'm not gonna say that they're gonna address that in the summer necessarily. They have problems, I think, at left back, and they have problems at the base of midfield, and left wing is not ideal. But I don't know that you prioritize left wing until you have a good sense of how you're actually going to use Griezmann, and I'm sure they do. I just don't know exactly what the thinking is there. But there's some holes, man. There's some real holes, and Griezmann ain't going to plug all of them, but it's going to be fun. It's going to be very, very
true.
fun.
And to be fair, do they know how they're going to use him? Because they just let go of their coach. You know what I mean? So, like, there is a part of it where they truly can rebuild this. And if it makes sense to have one of those kind of auxiliary sort of, like, nominal left wingers, but really is, like, a left half space guy or a guy who's, like, dropping into midfield most of the time, like, that could work. But then who's your left back and who's going to be able to provide that requisite width? The other thing is they're really thin along the back. And Antoine Griezmann is not going to help their central defending. Right. Yeah. And so that is where when you're looking at, okay, how do they fortify? You need to make sure Robin Janssen isn't that important to your success in the sense that he can still be your best defender, but don't make him your only defender you trust.
Yeah. Right. I would be floored, absolutely floored if Orlando don't sign a center back in the summer. I'll just leave that there. I mean, I just cannot possibly imagine that they wouldn't. Jeff, let's do one more bit in this opening segment. Mohamed Salah, I don't know if you've heard, but he is potentially working his way out of Liverpool, and everybody, and I mean everybody, is really excited about the possibility of him coming to Major League Soccer, especially folks high up in the Egyptian FA. What's the deal, Jeff, with this whole story? And I hear that you maybe have talked to some important people about it.
Yeah. So Ibrahim Hassan is the director, kind of like think the Matt Crocker figure of the Egypt national team. So he is technical director. His brother is the head coach. Both of them played.
Oh, we had a real Berhalter situation here. That's interesting.
That was my first thought, man. When I read that, I was just like, was this as big of a thing in Egypt as it was in the U.S.? Was just like, are we?
Do they have parody
that?
Twitter accounts about this? Do they? I need to know. Yeah, okay.
That's our response. I think that's the way that we get back at this because ultimately, what Hassan ends up saying about the concept of Mo Salah coming to Major League Soccer is that, well, I've seen him linked to PSG, I've seen him linked to Bayern Munich, I've seen him linked to big clubs in Italy, and I would rather have him go there than have him come to Major League Soccer. And the idea was that, quote, MLS is too far out of the spotlight, and that if he doesn't get those offers, he should go to the Saudi Pro League instead, which was a very interesting sort of thing. Basically also saying, like, do you ever hear of Lionel Messi anymore? I haven't heard of the guy since he went to Major League Soccer. Salah would be even less relevant than that guy, was basically the argument, and actually pretty close to verbatim what the guy says. So I was in Tampa for some of the league meetings that were going on this week, and I ended up catching Commissioner Don Garber for about 10 minutes. And so I put it to him, and I was just like, and the commissioner hadn't heard this before. And so, I was reading it to Don and just reading the full transcript of those quotes. And right away, Don's just like, well, that's the first time I've ever heard anything like that. And keep in mind, this is a guy who is used to, like, the Italy national team coach not picking Sebastian Giovinco when he is absolutely blowing the doors down the league and then saying that the league doesn't matter, right? Or Mexican national teams, as Garber cites in his response, Mexican national managers saying that they won't call up players if they sign with Major League Soccer clubs, which isn't the case anymore, right? They're actually looking at MLS academies for dual nationals with increasing regularity. So, Garber then just kind of continues to say, well, if he thinks they're irrelevant, I'm happy to give them an Apple login so that they can actually start to watch the games and see that, yes, they are playing soccer these days. And then goes in, and I think that the part that really kind of stuck with me afterwards as I was coming back was more so the kind of perception that America is still dealing with as a soccer country. And I think that this is something that, look, I'm in day 7 of a national team camp, right? So, like, I'm also very much in this sort of, like, perception of the U.S. men's national team, and it's just this perception that we'll never get it, and it's just not true. This is Garber speaking. We've got dozens of players who came through MLS teams playing in Europe. We've got some of the best players in the world playing here. We have the best facilities if you put them up against any league in the world. We have a national team coach, talking about Pochettino, who's been on the world stage and believes in Major League Soccer. I've been dealing with skepticism for 27 years. It's never stopped me, and it never will. Whew. Like, it was just like a level of frankness and candidness that's just kind of rare to catch someone in with that. But also, to his point, like, why, if you're gonna say that it's a matter of, like, standard of league or visibility of league or whatever, like, maybe for Egypt and for fans of Egypt, the Saudi Pro League would make more sense because more of their national team pool is there. So that's context you also kind of have to keep in mind. But, just interesting to once again be running into this sort of, like, is MLS a viable thing as a star maker for players.
Do you think, Jeff, is there one team in MLS who is most upset with the comments coming out of Egypt on this? Because they really want Mo Salah. Is there one club in MLS that you think would be a really, really perfect spot for him as you've been thinking about his ideal landing spot? If it's not going to be any of those elite European clubs, if it's not going to be Saudi Arabia, I'm curious what you think about that.
Well, I think the one who would be most upset is San Diego, right? Just given their ownership structure. Like, I would imagine having, a prominent sporting figure in Egypt, criticizing a league in which, a major Egyptian investor has invested in probably doesn't feel great. And they were linked to Mo Salah because of that link, like a year ago or whatever. And then Anders Dreyer, it's good. That'll work for them, right? Sure. And I don't think that he's a good compliment necessarily, Mo Salah. You're running into Chucky Lozano problems there in terms of spacing. In terms of teams that would be really upset about it, I mean, like, there's a handful of teams that would seem to make sense. Like Miami, of course, was an immediate link. Who was the other one that I saw right away last week? I think it was in The Athletic.
What was behind your eyes, but I'm struggling. NYCFC have been connected.
It's a paywall. I mean, what's behind my eyes is a paywall. I'm trying to get by in real time.
There you go. Yeah, we've all been there. I mean, there's been a bunch of MLS teams connected. It just doesn't seem like anything has been especially concrete at this point, So that's the question. I think San Diego would be a fascinating fit. Just doesn't feel very San Diego-y to do that sort of thing at this point. I mean, I think they've hit their youth identity fairly quickly. I really don't know if Salah ends up in MLS where he ends up, but it is fascinating to hear what Don Garber thinks when those kinds of comments come through. And I very much like the idea of you sort of pulling out the scroll, this Egyptian scroll, and reading him the comments and him reacting in real time. That's ideal. Shout out to Jeff, by the way, who is, as you said, in the final hurdles of a week-long stay in Atlanta, who just got back from Florida, barely slept, and has been absolutely throwing some darts in the first segment of this episode. Jeff, let's take a break, and let's come back. You can go drink 4 energy drinks.
Let's go take a nap.
Come back in, and we're going to do transfer window superlatives. Listeners, stay with us. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. We're going to dive into our transfer window superlatives for the winter window, recapping our thoughts on the window that was. Jeff, let's start with the most obvious category, team with the best window. I think there are a couple of nominations here, but I do have one choice that stands out above the rest. I'm curious to see if you have the same one.
Yeah, I'm really curious if it's them too, because I went RSL. And we've said some nice things about RSL throughout this start of the season, right? But I think really just appreciating the scale that we're kind of talking about with some clubs versus other clubs, right? Like, it's one thing to be able to turn and say, okay, well, Miami had the best window because they spent the most money, because they were able to bring in 2 designated players and whatever the case may be, right? And when you look at the names that Real Salt Lake brought in, no, of course, there's not someone who has Rodrigo de Paul's cachet. There's not someone who necessarily comes in with the goal-scoring record in CONCACAF of Herman Berterame, or so I've been told he has that record, right? But instead what you have is Morgan Guilavogi, and you have Juan Manuel Sanabria, and those are kind of your headliners. And that's a very different scale. But like the coherence with which they've worked into Pablo Mastroeni's system, the way that they've seemed to fit the culture. And then you look at some of their more, what you would, I guess, call like down squad additions, but these are really starting level additions. They're just not necessarily their 2 big ones. You've got Sergi Slallins coming in and has immediately kind of stepped in, and and has really helped integrate into that lineup in a nice way where they didn't have attacking depth, and they kind of had struggled to find a consistent striker after Chicho Arango had left. So good on them to be able to have someone who can lead that line. Lucas Engel is someone who's done it in this league before, comes in from Middlesbrough. We haven't seen as much of him necessarily, but like good quality upgrades in the back line. Spearing, similar thing in midfield. There's just like a lot of really good additions to raise the floor. But it also looks like a window where they prepared just in case Diego Luna leaves midway through the season. And now they're not panicking to find a replacement, because right now what they are is they're frustrating someone who can't get more minutes than they think that they should get. And then suddenly, if an offer comes in for Luna that meets the valuation, it's a lot easier to flip knowing you have the guy in the house already. So I love the way that they kind of set up that potential exit as well with this. And I just think they changed their stars from being a team that, again, like Dallas, is kind of competing just to get above that play-in line to a team that, credibly could catch any of the projected top 4 in the conference if they're slipping and maybe take their place in their second home game in the first round.
Yeah, RSL are absolutely a team on my list. They were my top honorable mention, and really my coin flip away from the other club, which I'll get to in just a second. But I think RSL deserve all the flowers that you've given them just now and that we've given them basically all season long. You mentioned the summer, Jeff. I don't think RSL were just a team to watch in this window. They're going to be a fascinating team to watch in the summer. Certainly one of these teams, the teams to watch. Luna and Gozo are both players that have real, genuine European interest, and they're both big parts of this team. I mean, we've just seen Luna sort of get back into the fold. if he goes, I think RSL will probably add someone in his place, even though if he were to leave, I don't think they would fold immediately because we've already seen them play big games without him playing a huge role and them do fairly well this season. But I think they would add, which makes them an intriguing team on that side of things. And then Gozo. I don't know what happens if Gozo leaves for this team. I think that one, this sounds weird to say and almost wrong, maybe hurts more. I don't feel comfortable saying that, but I kind of believe it just because Gozo is bringing something that nobody else is going to bring to this attack. I mean, if it's Dom Marchuk who gets more minutes at right wing back or Yedlin or whatever who gets minutes there, they're just very different players than Gozo, all very different players from each other. So I wonder if that necessitates a move as well. But I love the RSL shot. I think relative to broad expectations, they probably raised their level more than any other team in MLS. And so I think that's a really, really good answer. My pick for this is Nashville, who I think are kind of the other choice here. I don't think they moved themselves as far up from where they were at the end of last season, right? When they lose their last game, everybody thought they were going to be a good team again in 2026. So in that way, they didn't do what RSL did. They didn't drastically change how we think of them. But in a way, they kind of did. Because while they didn't maybe move themselves up in the Supporter Shield standings as much because they're already quite close to the top in how we think about this team, I think they made the jump that's the hardest to make, which is from a very, very good team who's sort of contending for the Shield and sort of contending to MLS Cup to being a team that is genuinely rubber stamped as a contender in both of those races. And that's what Cristian Espinosa does. And he's been as good as everybody thought he would be for Nashville so far since they showed up. And Nashville have done some really impressive things, both in the regular season and in CONCACAF Champions Cup, taking down Miami in a way that I'm sure felt incredibly satisfying to all involved. We're already seeing the benefits of Espinosa in this team. Toss in Weledzia at center back, who I think could legitimately be an upgrade on Walker Zimmerman. And then some good young pieces too, right? I mean, Nashville are no longer the old guys FC that they were for a long time under Gary Smith. Reed Baker-Whiting coming in, Warren Madrigal coming in. There's just a lot to like. And for me, that the incomings so far outweigh the outgoings for this Nashville team. And I think they really did make that jump that's the hardest to make. So Nashville, Jeff, were my contender here.
It is the toughest one to make, for sure. Like, how many times have you seen a team that looks like they're a very good team, very watchable, but just can't get over the hurdle? And that's, to your point, like, that is the kind of move that they look to make with this last window. This was also the one where they sold Jonathan Perez, right? So that was kind of like we found a $2 million bill on the floor, right? We didn't even really have the guy in the building for that long, but someone offered us the money, we took the money, and we said thanks, and we reinvested, right? And so, like, stuff like that also, I think, makes moves like the Baker-Whiting move but easier, because now they do have at least some track record of selling players who are in their young 20s rather than necessarily just 18-year-old prospects that other organizations can look and say, okay, we'll develop him, actually, thank you. I mean, with Nashville, the other thing too is that Weledzia signing. Like, I completely agree. Just the way it is so difficult to evolve a back line in terms of like how it operates, and I think that you do have that rare opportunity when you replace Zimmerman with him, and it's early days, but I think early signs are really encouraging. And I just, man, I'm with you. Like, it's so clear that Nashville has catapulted themselves, and done maybe what I also projected from Chicago, and maybe they haven't quite got there or won't quite get there after all this year, but just it is a very difficult threshold to cross, and I think it's pretty emphatic that they just busted the door straight down.
Yeah, very impressed. Fortunate, but they took advantage of an opportunity that the Quakes handed to them, which I really do appreciate.
and the Quakes, it's so funny because it's like the Quakes, in theory, you could maybe say that they had one of the better windows if you just look at incomings. But, like, that Espinosa business absolutely, like, disqualified them. I didn't give them my worst window, but, like, it did disqualify them. And actually, I'm going to thwart with the format of the episode because if you introduce every single category, then it's going to feel really uncomfortable if you try to lead a category. So if it wasn't San Jose, Joe, if it wasn't San Jose, and if it wasn't a team that just kind of forgot to pick up the option but then made up for it with some pretty good business otherwise, I think that there's a few good contenders here for worst window, but I'm really curious what way you went.
I also think there are several good contenders for worst window. I'm still even torn even now. I'm going to go with the Philadelphia
You wanted me to go first, didn't you? Okay.
I kind of did, but I will go with the Philadelphia Union. Yeah. This is weird because I actually like some of their recruitment, but it is such a gut punch to lose as many players as they did and to replace them with so many question marks after you won the Shield. If the Union had finished 8th in the East last year, I don't think it really would have been as big of a deal. But that they were so good, and it felt like that there was something in their recipe that they had assembled with that group of guys, then I think it's frustrating to see so many of these pieces walk out the door. Kai Wagner, Ty Baribo, Jakob Glesnes, Mikael Ura. Those are important players to your team. And I think you brought in some decent players. I think Alado could be a really good player. and MLS. I think Anello has looked pretty good in bits and spurts this year. I think Finn Sundstrom is a talented young center back.
Really good pick.
I don't know much about the new left back Ndinga yet, but I've watched him a little bit, and he looks like he's going to be a fine MLS player. I think they added decent guys, but they lost game breakers, and we just don't know if these guys coming in are going to be game breakers, and the early signs are probably not. So that one, I think, stings more than anybody else. At least the Union did stuff. Some other teams didn't really do stuff. But, I mean, sometimes doing less is more. So, Jeff, the Union are my pick here. Who's yours?
Yeah, I almost thought about pitching a less is more category, and maybe we could still sneak one in if somehow we let ourselves allow time. The other thing with the Union, too, like, it just a rare sort of... how do I put this? When Liverpool replaces Jurgen Klopp with Arne Slot and they win the title, that's generally seen as a continuation of the Klopp era, right? And that's generally talked about as he inherited the players, he got the last juice, and now we're going to begin the changeover. Well, I think with Philly, it looked like such a not radical difference from what Jim Curtin was doing under Carnell, but to win the Shield in your first year under that coach, Philly hasn't historically been a club like Colorado that has the success. Immediately teams start kind of circling and saying, hey, is that guy available? How much would it take to pry that guy? And you're like, yep, okay, great. We're going to regenerate. We know we can do this, right? So they kind of operate in 2-year cycles, which frustrates the fan base a lot until you get to the growth phase of that 2-year cycle. And then they get really excited, right? Philly hasn't historically been one of those clubs. And so, I mean, that's the elephant in the room, right? That Ernst Tanner has also been under investigation and now is suspended through June 1st, which made their window more difficult, I suppose. But they laid the groundwork months in advance, right? You always lay the groundwork for windows, 1 or 2 windows ahead of time. So, like, I don't even really think it's like Ernst wasn't here and so they didn't know what to do thing. But, man, yeah, it just seemed like they didn't really have as much faith in, like, that core to repeat it. And so they just kind of went into a not rebuild, but regeneration phase, maybe that I wasn't expecting them to. So they were on my short list as well. I'm going to stick in the Eastern Conference and I'm going to go with Columbus because I think it was a very disappointing window. And again, I'm talking about that planning across multiple windows. And we knew since 24, since they lost in CONCACAF, that, Wilfred Nance's like peak Columbus crew was already being deconstructed. Aiden Morris had left, but that it was going to need to be fully kind of hit reset. And the idea with signing Rydström was that you had someone who could kind of continue a lot of the same principles of play. Well, when you look at the players that they brought in, who fit best, they're kind of win-now acquisitions, especially when you think of like Andre Gomes, right? And this is a team that really seems like they need to kind of get back to basics and figure out what they want to be, how they want to play, where they want to utilize their space, when they're going to generate their chances, whatever the case. They still have so many of these sort of basic fundamental principle questions that to be getting signings that don't really seem to project for the next iteration, because they get back to MLS Cup every, 3 to 5 years at this rate. Whoever those guys are, I'm not sure that they're coming into this team right now. So I'm just a little confused about it. They went from a team that seemed like they had a really kind of coherent sort of, multi-year vision to one that's maybe just a little bit more figuring that out in real time. And that's okay. But, I think that they did fall off quite a bit as a result in my projections.
I think that's all fair on Columbus. I ding them more for last year's opening transfer window when you see Daniel Gazda come into this team, then I ding them for this particular window, because it just seems to me there have been a lot of good discussions about the crew, and I was thinking back about our chat about the crew in Cincinnati and like how worried we are, and the more I think about Columbus, the more I think I well downplayed how worried I should be about them in that conversation. So I'm just amending that now. I am worried about Columbus, and I am certainly worried about some of the tactical choices that Henrik Rydström has made so far this season. I've been swayed as I've thought about that more. At the same time, I just don't see where the chance creation is coming from in this team. It's Max Arston and question mark. I mean, Rossi sort of does some of that, but I think he's better as a scorer than he's a creator. Abu Ali is a well-rounded 9, but Gazdag, the player in Gazdag's DP spot, I think should be that creator. I mean, that's what made Cucho so special, that he could do a little bit of all that stuff. They don't have that guy. They don't have Cucho. Cucho ain't walking through that door, Like they don't have that piece. And so I think they are just straight up limited in what they can be right now. I still think they can be a good team in the East. I still think they can be the 6th best team or whatever in the Eastern Conference. But I think that's well fair, Jeff, to ding them on all those fronts. I have NYCFC and the Revs as honorable mentions. We are moving slow, so I'm going to speed us through to the team with the most confusing window, and I'll toss up my nomination right now and then throw it to you. Austin FC are my answer to this. San Jose, I think, is a great nomination because they of the Espinosa option that they forgot to pick up that we already talked about. So they're like the meme team, I suppose, of this transfer window. But yeah. I just don't get Austin's business. They got rid of Osman Bukhari, which is awesome. Like, that's incredible business. It sounds like they weren't that maybe far away from getting rid of Uzuni either, which would have been incredible. I just don't see how the pieces fit together. And I didn't see that in preseason. We talked about it in preseason. It's been 5 games. I still don't see it. And Nico Estevez is trying to iterate to figure out how they fit together because he hasn't figured it out either. Joseph Rosales came in from Minnesota United, where he was a very good left wing back for a lot of last season. And then Austin plopped him down on the right wing. Okay? Facundo Torres has been playing as a 10 for the first 4 games of the year until he moved to the right wing this past game. Okay, he's not a 10, and I know there's no 10 in this team, but that's y'all's problem, right? I mean, that's
right.
Not my problem for pointing that out. There's just way too much of this resting on Owen Wolff's shoulders, ultimately, and the guy hasn't been healthy so far this year. They knew that, of course, coming into the season, so I never thought that this version of Austin that we've seen through the first stretch of the year would be the best version. I just, even when Owen Wolff's back, he will certainly help them. He's not a chance-creating 10. Like, I just don't... None of this makes sense to me about how Austin have built this. I think there are probably a number of folks around MLS who are on the hot seat. I would say Burrell's seat is probably a little toasty right now, Jeff.
And I think it should be because he's fared so much better for his ability to get players out of the club. Like, that side of how he's doing his job is remarkable. When you look at the fees he got, just historically for Driussi in particular comes to mind. But there's also been a few others where it's like he's brokering these fees that like we aren't expecting. And I think that like in a lot of our group chats, like there's a lot of kind of chuckling of like, how did you get them to take that? But it's never really getting reinvested in a coherent way where it's like, oh, you're making those moves to make the team better. It's just making those moves because it looks really good on the CV or something. I'm not sure. For confusing, this is where I decided to kind of shoehorn our requisite Inter Miami mention into here, just because and I wrote about this, we talked about it after I wrote about this, but if their focus really was on winning CONCACAF this year, they certainly did not have a we want to win CONCACAF sort of window, right? And I think that there was just so much changeover and broken combinations across the field that just made it really difficult when they got to those games, especially those games against Nashville in the round of 16, where they just looked like they didn't have the time to rehearse and that there were too many different players who were still trying to kind of play into the coach's good graces or were trying to, really show this is why he's here, whatever the case may be. But the reality is they failed in the competition that mattered most, like you put it last week, Joe. And so to have a window like that where now you're looking and saying, okay, yeah, are they going to figure it out by MLS Cup? Yeah, almost certainly, right? Like they'll be a good team for the bracket. They'll contend for the Supporters Shield now. They don't have this competition. And keep in mind, teams in the CONCACAF Champions Cup are not involved in the U.S. Open Cup. So they're not in that front either. But man, yeah, it's just a weird window. And one that certainly got a lot of headlines because Inter Miami gets a lot of headlines, right? But I don't know if it made them better in the short term at all.
Yeah, I think that's all fair. I didn't ding Miami for the window, and I didn't praise them for the window really either, as we've had some time to think about it. I think the window was probably about as good as it could have been in the circumstances, and I still think Miami are going to be a good team, Jeff. And it sounds like you're on the same wavelength there. But it's just going to take them a little time to figure it out. It was always going to take them some time to figure it out when you lose Alba and Busquets, and I think this was just inevitable. And it's a little unfortunate that Miami are always going to talk a big game, right, about how they wanted to be in the Club World Cup. They've been making noise about Copa Libertadores, and then you fall on your face. And I think that was unfortunate, clearly, for them, given how much they talked and they didn't back it up. At the same time, I can't escape this idea that the growing pains are always going to be there for them. So sometimes you just got to take a medicine, and that's what happened. I have one other nomination for this category, and that's San Diego on the most confusing front for the Chucky Lozano drama. Kind of felt like some of this was maybe a little avoidable, but I don't know.
So avoidable.
You think?
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought this up because I was struggling to find a way to shoehorn this one in. Yeah, I mean, just like, I think we said it like the day it happened, where it's just like, what a weird way to kind of sabotage your ability to move on from this guy, right? Because now there's just no urgency. Teams are just waiting for them to offer the buyout so they can sign him on a free, and they're going to have to pay a higher salary probably as a result of it, but like, you don't have to pay a transfer fee. So just a really weird one. And now, like, yeah, their squad building, it's really good that Tyler Heaps and the rest of the staff is great at identifying either young talent who is ready to play meaningful MLS minutes or players like Amal Pellegrino who are not being utilized to the fullness of their potential, right? And I'm sure Lewis Morgan maybe fits into that bucket a little bit more, though that's more of a, if he stays healthy, that's really the only thing we need to see guy than Pellegrino was when he arrived. But very, very fortunate that they're so good at other sides of that, because most teams could not handle having a DP like Chucky Lozano just like sitting on their salary budget sheet and not playing a minute and still be a top 4 team in their conference. It's just remarkable.
Yep. I could not agree more with anything that you just said. Jeff, let's take one more break, and then we're going to come back in with more transfer window superlative categories. Listener, stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Total Soccer Show. Jeff, I want to toss this category your way. The team that we thought would do more Who did you think would do more in the winter transfer window?
God, this is great because you're giving me the free space on my bingo card first.
Oh, really?
Would you like to place the thing down, whatever? Which is
tell me more.
I generally assume that teams will show up to preseason with at least 24 players.
Ah, yes, I see.
I tend to assume that you want to enter your 11v11 scrimmages with enough players to have 11v11. That is your fundamental baseline. And the fact that Sporting Kansas City has been so slow to just fill that roster. And if you are running into issues with visas, go domestic. Go for players who are in the league. Use allocation money to trade for players or sign American players or whatever the case may be, right? But there was just something that was so bizarre in real time watching this team just look like they forgot the season started on the day it started and the way that they went about it, that I just thought, I thought they would do more on that side. Now, the other side of that is they hired a new sporting director. And usually when you have a new sporting director, they want to come in with their kind of first signature move, right? Usually you look and there will be one, either at a minimum, it's a TAM guy, right? But usually it's a designated player or a U22 guy or whatever the case may be. Someone who came with them from their former club maybe, but someone who looks and you can kind of look and say, okay, so that's the direction they want to go to. This is indicative of the ambition that they have, the way that they recruit, whatever. And I just don't even really think that they had one of those moves. And I think that's the part that almost confused me even more than the wow, they don't even have enough warm bodies to heat up the room, right? I just think that we're still very much waiting to see what the David Lee iteration of Sporting Kansas City will look like. It still feels like they're continuing to dig out from the aftermath of Peter Vermees, which makes sense given the length of his tenure and the importance to the club. But it seemed like after how they spent almost all of 2025 seemingly doing that sort of dig through the rubble work, it's weird that they're still just digging through rubble with different shovels at this point.
Yeah. Yep, that's all well said, Jeff. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head at the end of that, which is this is a team that's still trying to dig themselves out of a hole. And it seems to me that what David Lee and the front office have chosen to do, we should also know there's been an ownership change, and Peter Maluka is now the primary owner of this club. And he seems biting at the bullet. Chomping at the bit. Biting at the bullet. That's a totally different.
Biting at the bullet. Yeah,
he seems biting at the bullet. Nice he seems chomping. Yeah, just a little gunpowder. Just give me a little bit.
As a treat, yeah.
He seems very eager to spend money, where he's on social media, replying to tweets, talking about how he's going to invest a lot of money in this team, not just saying it publicly. He does it so much that he is literally on social looking for opportunities to tell people this. But I think David Lee chose to avoid making bad decisions. And his decision to do that was a choice in and of itself, which has left Sporting Kansas City very shorthanded. But I don't think David Lee, my speculation here is that David Lee and the new regime in Kansas City show up. They realize we don't have the sporting infrastructure nor the staff to make decisions that we can be confident in. And so the choice that we're going to make is to make fewer decisions than we wanted to, because we would rather have an absence of a decision than to make a bad one. And I understand the frustration about that. I think they're a perfectly excellent nomination for this category. They belong here. But I think that's the reality, is that when David Lee gets there in the front office, as far as I understand it, it's David Lee, it's Mike Burns, and it's one scout for Sporting Kansas City, and that's it. So there's a lot to do.
It'd be really cool, by the way, if his name was Juan Scout. We have one Scout. Yes. What's his name? Juan Scout. Great. Great. That's it.
We need this to be a real thing. Hey, if you or someone you know is named Juan Scout, I've got a career opportunity for you. There's just been so much off-field, off-roster stuff to do in Kansas City that I think even more than maybe folks thought there would be in that club. But it's a good nomination for this category. I've got San Jose here. I don't actually hate their window. I think there was a real addition by subtraction that happened, and I've written about that. I also thought they'd add another DP alongside Timo Werner, and I suppose they're going to wait till the summer to do that, which I don't hate for them. But I did think that they would do a little bit more. Right wing feels like a really obvious place for them to reinforce. And DeJuan Jones being out for the season maybe means that they need to grab a left back as well. There's something there. I think NYCFC are in this category for me as well as a nomination. Sure. They didn't sign. They added Kai Trewin, and that was it. They almost signed Musa Silla. That didn't happen.
Yeah,
they never went back in
did.
and got a 9. So that I would assume they're going to rectify that in the summer. Although maybe not. Maybe they just ride it out for the season and wait till Alonso Martinez is back. I don't know. But that was the other one for me, along with San Jose, that really, really popped here.
The other one that I had,
you, Jeff.
Yeah, the other one, I agree with you on New York City. I had them in this category as well. Like, it felt like they had so much potential. They had a solid, not spectacular regular season. They had a great run through the bracket to the conference final. It felt like there was that obvious need for another piece, not just to replace Alonso Martinez, but to also kind of supplement Fernandez Mercado and maybe take some pressure finally off of Maxi Morales' very tired shoulders for chance creation. And so just to not even have that piece come in necessarily to work into those rotations surprised me too. The other one I had, and we kind of touched on it in the first segment, during the Santi Moreno hit, was FC Dallas, because I remember when they were eliminated in the playoffs in the first round, I was saying a lot of really nice stuff about being impressed with how they were playing, and you can really see a lot of how after losing Acosta, they sort of found more of their identity across the entire squad. And so if they just get that one player who actually does fit the culture but can do similar things to what they were hoping from Acosta, this is a team that I thought could make top 5 strides in the Western Conference. And it just really doesn't seem like that was necessarily the ambition for this window. And you already alluded to it, but this is probably another good time with Kansas City. And St. Louis City kind of said similar things about not wanting to overcommit in this first window. It is advisable because of the structure of a World Cup season, where you only have like a third of your season, or certainly less than 2/3, which is usually the norm before the summer window opens. So you have more time with those summer acquisitions to actually impact your stars and the standings. So it does make some sense in that side of it. It was just still so surreal to be like, it has been this many days since Kansas City knew that they needed to get a squad ready for 26, and boy,
I just don't think we've ever seen anything like it, and I suppose we've never seen anything like Peter Vermees' longevity with a club in Major League Soccer, so those things probably pair together quite well. Jeff, best signing. I'm not going to bring up any names that we haven't already talked about on the show, so I don't know if you are. Are you going to introduce somebody? Who do you got?
Christian Espinoza was my best signing, but you laid that plum case out perfectly. I'm going to say Steven Uzakria, though, is also another one that maybe we should talk about here too, because I think that throughout Cherundolo's tenure after 2022, he really struggled to get the most out of a midfield. It seemed like they brought in players generally as they deconstruct that midfield, which was pretty much Ilie Sanchez, Kellen Acosta, and who was there? The other Cifuentes, right? And those three were operating so well, and generally the replacement that came in didn't necessarily look like an upgrade. It looked like someone who could maybe maintain the level. And now this is finally a chance where it's like, okay, so if you do have a player for Marc Dos Santos who can be in the heart of the park and be that impactful, really unfortunate what kind of happened with that knee knock and with the dead leg and the kind of compounding issues with that. And hopefully he can come back quick, because just looking at how he was able to get them whirring and how naturally he complemented the games of Bouanga and Son, like just a fantastic pickup that kind of somehow slid under the radar, which it really never should have, considering he's been one of the best midfielders, if not players altogether, in CONCACAF for quite some time.
Yeah, fascinated to see what happens with him. I mean, he's only on loan through the summer, and then maybe there's something more. Maybe there's a DP deal that gets struck there, or maybe they decide that that's not how they want to use that spot. I don't know what direction LAFC is going to go. I think they should, personally. Because your third DP slot's predicated on whether or not Bouanga or Son leaves, right? And that's what your next evolution is. You don't need to get a third guy in the attacking third who's going to be a DP. So I would just lock in Uzakria if his health is right and if he likes it in LA, personally. Yeah, I don't think that's a bad take at all. I'm not ready to be on that island with you yet, Jeff. But I'm not. I'm like plotting out a route to get there. I'm like, we're building
the dock. It'll be easier for you to get here when you arrive.
Yeah, and then I got to build the boat. It's gonna take time, but I'm not mad at it. Espinosa was my pick here as well, with honorable mentions to Gila Vogie and Sanabria, all players we talked about already. So let's move this thing right along. Weirdest signing of the MLS primary transfer window. I've got one for you, Jeff. Please. And this is probably an answer that maybe will look different in a few months. Luis Munteanu for DC United. It's big fee for someone without a major pedigree or a versatile skill set from what I've seen of his career. It's also just too early to judge. And I'll hold my hands up on this. He's played 64 minutes for DC United due to injury. It was weird how sort of under wraps it seemed like that whole thing was. Maybe there's a medical plan there somewhere if you look hard enough. I don't know. But I mean, it's just not happened yet for him in DC, and so I don't know if it will. DC United have been more competent than maybe a lot of folks expected. I think we were probably fairly high on their transfer window across the board, just bringing in solid dudes. But Munteanu is the question mark, and I don't exactly know how he elevates this team just because we haven't seen it. So I've got him on my list. And then my honorable mention, just to toss this out now, Lucas Hoyos for Atlanta United, signing a late 30s goalkeeper coming off of a major knee injury for a team that already lacks defensive stability. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Oh, and by the way, that team's also sort of in cap purgatory, and you could save money by just playing Jaden Hibbert, who looked fine for the last 10 games of last year. But no, let's make sure Tata gets his veteran goalkeeper from Newell's Old Boys, and that he can have all the stuff that he wants. That one frustrates me a bit, and would certainly frustrate me if I was an Atlanta United fan.
If you want a stable career, kids, be an Argentine goalkeeper.
Yes.
Because, my God, in your late 30s, you will find jobs that no other.
Do we have a
can.
home for you? That's what MLS tells us.
It's MLS. That's right. My weirdest signing actually was more to like just the scale of what you expect from the club, and I'm not one really to question much that LAFC does with their windows. I don't really look at their moves and say like I don't understand the rhetoric, the math that got them to this answer. I don't really understand shipping $1 million for Jacob Schaffelberg to be a guy off the bench. Especially when you already had David Martinez there. And maybe part of this is like they just didn't know David Martinez would actually be able to bounce back in that way, but you probably should, because I think that the most crucial thing there is what kind of relationship did he have with Dos Santos when Dos Santos was the number 2? Because then that is where, generally with the structure of most locker rooms, like Martinez is talking to Dos Santos a lot more than he's talking to Cherundolo when they're both in the room, right? And so you should have had a pretty good sense that he would have been ready, and that's a lot of allocation money. Or was it cash for it? It was allocation money.
It was
right?
allocation money. Yeah,
that's what I thought. That's a lot to part with for a guy who's not really coming in and changing your final third like from the opening whistle. So especially given how unwilling to rotate Dos Santos seems to be, at least so far in this stage, and kind of wanting to ride with his guys every single game until they're telling him we can't possibly go further. I don't know. It just wasn't a move that he operated with the pace of Bouanga and Son, but it didn't really see how he would combine or complement them at all. And now that he is the fourth guy in that 3-man starting crew at best, like I just don't really understand choosing that to be the target from within the league to part with $1 million for.
Jeff, we have reached our final category. It has been quite the journey to get here, but I'm thrilled that we're here. The most underrated signing of the primary transfer window. I have 4 nominations. I've saved my longest list of nominations for last. I want you to go first and see how much overlap we have.
Okay. Can I say Sanabria first of all? Because he arrived so late and he's a left back and he came from Liga MX. So I think that there's just a lot of boxes that were checked. And he's someone to keep in mind who came up through Atletico Madrid and then went after they bought San Luis. Was kind of.
Oh, I did not even know that.
I didn't either until like 2 weeks ago. It's all good.
Nice.
But so this was really his first time outside of, I guess, whatever you would call the Atleti football group.
Family
of clubs. The stable of clubs.
When you're in Atleti, you're family, just like all.
That's right. Until you go to Salt Lake City. And he's been phenomenal. Like, he looks like he is an obvious replacement to Kai Wagner in the best left back in Major League Soccer by a country mile sort of conversation. And just the way that he's able to integrate with Guilavogi, I think has also been excellent. But if you're looking for a non-designated player that I think really could benefit from a move they got, I've got Daniel Edelman going to St. Louis.
Ooh, I like it.
Actually, I was really challenged. I've got a couple of other moves that are more like DPs and TAM guys or whatever. But the more I think about it, and the more that I've watched so far, that is a player that Yohan Demay will be very familiar with, coming up against him, when he was an assistant in Columbus. And Edelman got a share of touches under Sandro Schwartz, but it was a very different utilization. And right now he's being asked to do much more kind of recirculating work rather than always push it forward. And you're seeing a little bit more composure from him. And now the game isn't getting stretched so far where so often Edelman's fouls in Red Bulls were recovery fouls. And it was him trying to just kind of grab onto a jersey because he was behind them because of his positioning, right? Well, now if you've got him in more stable positions and he's doing less of that work, I think I'm starting to see that he might be like a Will Trapp 2.0 type. And I know that that's not necessarily like a profile where everyone's going to be like, oh, that's so sexy. He's going to be sold for like $5 million to Europe someday. But that's a career MLS starter, right? And that is a guy who could project to have 300 starts for your club, given the age that you brought him in for. And it doesn't get much more valuable than that in this league, especially on a domestic player and someone who just looks like he integrates well with Chris Durkin. Those two together is just kind of a fun double domestic, double pivot. I've been really impressed with that one. I think that it's clear that he was brought in to stick around in the lineup when you compare where he's ended up compared to, let's say, Peter Stroud, who gets traded in the same winter by New York to Minnesota and hasn't really played much at all. So I really like that move for St. Louis, and I think that is a good sort of savvy engine room pickup that could be, if St. Louis and Demay succeed together for a while, I won't be surprised because he's been in the lineup at least 29 times every single season, but the sprint season.
I love the Edelman shout, Jeff. He's not on my list, but it's a really good one, and I thought about putting him on my list. So I think we're still on the same wavelength there. You're talking about him maybe becoming the Will Trapp 2.0. the weird part about Edelman to St. Louis, to me, when the move was first coming through was, well, he's only ever played in these Red Bull sort of against the ball kind of systems, and I don't know if he can do the on-ball stuff. And I still don't really have a good firm read on that. But I was talking with Corey Ray the other day for a piece that will eventually come out on Backfield, and he basically said exactly what you just said, which is, he didn't use Will Trapp as a comparison, but said, I think we can get even more out of Daniel Edelman on the ball. When we were looking at him, we thought he had more to his game than just the Red Bull kind of stuff. But I appreciate about St. Louis and their build right now is that they haven't gone full Columbus. Like, there are definitely shades of Columbus. Ray and Tomei both have Columbus ties. They're playing this 3-4-3 shape. They're trying to use the ball to draw pressure and play through it, all those sorts of things. But you look at the profile some of their players, and Edelman's a great example of this. They're like Columbus, but a little more conservative. They're like Columbus, but a little safer, And I think they view that as being the right way to build into something that's going to last for a longer period of time, especially when the roster isn't fully formed, and maybe also just a better game model. And Edelman, I think, is a really good example of that. Now, that whole thing is really, really interesting to me, how that's all come together. I have my top answer, Jeff, and then I have 3 nominees, and I'm just going to run through it. Tomas Jakob for Atlanta United. Ain't nobody watching Atlanta United this year. I know that, listener, so I'm aware. But if you haven't seen Atlanta United, you're missing out on Tomas Jakob, who has played as a 6. He's played as a right back. He's looked very good in both spots. He's physical. He's aggressive. He looks good on the ball. Maybe not great on the ball, but good on the ball. He's dangerous in the air. He just will run through a wall. And I really, really like his profile. I think he's a floor-raising player for Atlanta. He's been very, very good. He is my most underrated signing because I legitimately think he could play real minutes for probably 25 teams in this league and be helpful for them. And Atlanta need more of those guys, let me tell you. My other nominations, I have George Manungu, but we already talked about him. I think he's going to be very, very good for Colorado. I have Guilherme for Houston. I kind of dunked all over this signing when it was made, and he's kind of maybe eat crow. I probably still wouldn't choose to sign a 30-ish-year-old DP winger, but he's been very good, and I can't deny that. So that's
and one thing
something
I will say is if he does have as much end product as we didn't see in his stat line and didn't see in his the base underlying numbers that we could glean about him with the leagues he's played in, but if he has that about him, it makes me a little less worried about Mateus Bogu's ability because he might not need to be guy 1A in the same way that it looked like he was going to coming into the season. And so that's huge at this point. Like I agree with you. I don't think that he would have fit the profile I was trying to sign. But if it's a complementary profile to Bogus's on the field, and if he's at a stage of his career where he's more able to be like, oh my gosh, wait, this is like the biggest role of importance I've ever had in my club career, and I'm just going to relish it because I didn't think I was going to get this at this stage. Like, that actually could play for at least a year or two, right? And then maybe that gives you more time where Bogus either becomes that guy or okay, actually we need to bring in a different profile guy to be that guy.
100%.
So,
yeah.
Savvy.
It's a very, very salient point, Jeff, on the top of Houston's roster. My final nomination, and this is the deepest cut, I think, name of the whole episode, Oswald So. San Diego FC center back, 20 years old, signed from the Danish second division over the offseason from San Diego. He started one game this year. I think it was the Dallas game for San Diego where they were rotating because of CONCACAF play.
Yeah.
The dude is very large, very comfortable on the ball, and it looks good. Like he looked perfectly at the level. And to reiterate, he's a 20-year-old coming from Denmark's second division. San Diego do this stuff, man. This is just their whole thing. They're really good at it, and So looks legit. I mean, I imagine he was signed looking ahead to when Manu Dua is no longer a player for San Diego FC.
Spot on.
And I think they're going to miss Dua, but So looks legit. So he's the deepest cut, and I saved him for last for that reason. Any other nominations, Jeff, you want to throw out before we're done?
That's such a good cut. I'm a little curious about Daniel Shalhoub in Toronto.
Yeah.
And I don't really know what the ceiling is there right now, right? But I think he can combine with Mihailovic pretty well. And again, is another one of those moves that you can make where you're not I know they signed him to a contract extension after they acquired him, which is also a good sign generally that it's not going to be a rental situation. But I think that it's also another one of those cases where they're still trying to figure out under Robin Fraser how they're going to be at their best. And so in the meantime, get good players who have done good things in the league, maybe not for a while. Maybe you could say it was because of the team around him when you look at how Kansas City has fared the last couple of years, and just kind of taking a flyer and see how it comes off. So underrated in the sense that it the calculus of it makes a lot of sense to me. I will also say from a deep cut, And Tino Lopez coming up from Tacoma for Seattle, looks like someone who maybe is ready to actually help with some of their issues along the back line in a way that they do need. 23-year-old, so not young, but that's also good for a center back, right? To have someone who's at least maybe played some games for Tacoma and had a good goal line clearance in Minnesota that really impressed me, and just generally could work into that rotation in a nice way. So again, more down squad than this is the one that makes them the MLS Cup favorite, but I already picked them to win MLS Cup at the start of the season. So I'm not looking for that at this point. So way
Jeff,
to go,
you don't have to
Antino.
defend yourself. I just named a 20-year-old that nobody listening to the show knows about, so you're entitled to name an ex-pro grad for the Sounders. That's totally in bounds on today's episode. Jeff Ruder, thank you so much for joining me today to talk through all of this MLS transfer stuff. I know you have been perhaps the world's busiest man. People are talking about nominating you for that category over the last week, and even more than that. Jeff, your ability to balance things and have interesting and helpful things to say about a whole bunch of American soccer stuff truly never ceases to impress me. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks, man. And I feel weird doing it without my background of tiny little knickknacks that I always have around me. So it'll be back to the knack next week. Looking forward to that.
Back to the knack. No better way to end the show than with that. Listener, thank you so much for joining us. Viewer, thanks for hanging out with us. We will be back again on the feed later on this week.